Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal. Patch 9.1 is coming out with a couple of quality of life stuff, and while not any major class updates, except for, of course, the uncapped AoE and a couple tidbits here and there corrected, adjusted with covenants, legendaries, and a few must-needed class changes, it isn't a major patch for crazy revamps. And even then, I still get a lot of questions from you guys asking me, what are some of the classes, if let's say you're returning for patch 9.1, what would I recommend? Or if you're thinking of picking up a new character, what could be fun and something that you would play long term? In this video, I'm going to list some of the classes that I'm actually pretty excited to check out in 9.1, something I think that I could long term play if let's say we're looking for a class that you want to just settle down with instead of constantly looking for something new, something fun and different to play. Starting off with the monks. I've been enjoying my Mistweaver as of recently. I never found myself to play a healer. However, I don't think I've played the right healers. I play a lot of melee. I play quite a bit of range, but mostly melee classes. I guess it just comes from being on my rogue as often as I am. The monks park themselves in the melee, where they're able to dish out damage while healing allies, which is such a fun gameplay playstyle. I love that about the paladin as well, but the monk has that nimbleness and mobility of a rogue, and I just personally find it really fun. So if you play a melee, this is a very awesome class because it just puts you in a position where you're comfortable with at all times. We're not even discussing the viability of a monk. They're just genuinely fun. I think a lot of players look at the numbers in terms of what's brought to raids, what isn't brought to dungeons, and monk sometimes gets bypassed, but it's genuinely really fun. And I feel like just because it's not considered meta doesn't mean you shouldn't check it out. Outside of that, monks have a fantastic playstyle as Brewmaster, Windwalker, and Mistweaver. I'm a huge fan of the gameplay playstyle, especially as a Windwalker with its master where you kind of shuffle abilities so you never repeat yourself. But if you are someone who's very performance oriented, Windwalkers are looking like their stocks are going to go up with this build. They are getting a lot of their AoE damage uncapped, so if you're looking at some big numbers and you're titillated by massive big crits on your screen as you blast everybody around you, Windwalkers are looking extra juicy going into this patch. Warrior is another class on this list. Just a solid all-rounder, was great at the start of Shadowlands and continues to be very powerful even today. Warriors as arms, fury, and prod are all very good as a melee, and the amount of damage they put up right now, they really are a meta class. They are super strong, fairly tanky, and are just all-round really good. The AoE damage uncapped for Arms Warriors and Fury Warriors is going to feel very fun, particularly if you're favoring Arms, which is the stronger build right now for PvE. The AoE damage I think is going to explode, but some of the different covenants you get to play with and the variety of different covenants I think is another thing worth mentioning. In 9.1 you'll be able to change covenants quite easily, so if you want to play a covenant that accents Arms, that accents Fury, that accents Prod, or even accents a PvE/PvP playstyle, there's going to be a lot of variety for a lot of players. Next class on this list would be Death Knight. I actually been enjoying my Death Knight quite a bit, and one of the most exciting parts about Death Knight for me is the covenant switching. Technically, none of the covenants for Death Knights are bad. While some may be the most versatile in a variety of different situations, all of them are good and actually work out in a variety of different builds just fine. With all this extra freedom to switch covenants whenever you want to. Once your main character reaches level 80, you can switch covenants anytime without any kind of quest line for 2 weeks. It's going to be a lot more fun and free, being able to maximize the value of Blood DKs, Frost Death Knights, and Unholy Death Knights with a variety of different covenants in a bunch of different content. You also got a lot of the covenants that are some of the weaker ones getting buffed with conduits, so hopefully it'll make the barriers of playing something that you find interesting less so of a barrier, as well as some of the legendaries and abilities, particularly the covenant abilities, receiving some tuning. Unholy as well as Frost DKs are also receiving a slight buff in PvP. It's going to be very interesting how both of those specs will perform, and I personally have very big hope for Unholy Death Knight improvements. Druid is another class that's an easy recommend because of the sheer variety of different builds that you can play with, especially when you're looking for a long-term class. You have 4 different specs, 4 different covenants, so many different builds and soulbinds combinations, as well as a variety of different legendaries, and this being a hybrid class, there's a lot of hybrid potential. You're a bear druid, you can actually pop out and do damage. Healer can start doing damage from afar. Just on the sheer variety alone, if you are multi-speccing on your druid, I think it will just have a lot of longevity if you pick this class. It also helps out the druid currently right now, every one of your specs is amazing at something. Whether it is PvE, PvP, whether it is raiding or dungeons, whether it is arenas or battlegrounds, all kinds of content, there's always a druid spec that's perfectly designed for something in the game. If you're someone who isn't particularly aware what you want to do in World of Warcraft come 9.1.5, what your interests are, I think a Druid is a very safe pick while you try to figure out what you're really into. Demon Hunter is another class that I think is going to be quite a lot of fun. With some of their different covenants receiving tuning, you are probably going to have a lot more variety of different Demon Hunter builds. Again, another class where technically, on paper, none of the Demon Hunter covenants are bad, and some of the weaker ones are getting a bit tuned, so it's going to be more of an even battle. Also, with a lot of the different uncaps with Demon Hunter AoE damage, I think we're going to see the spec really come to the forefront. Demon Hunters generally naturally have had great cleave while putting out great single target damage. Maybe while cooldown heavy, this damage always was a fun profile to play with. Fairly easy for a lot of players to get into, especially if you don't like too many buttons on your keys. And Demon Hunters are receiving great buffs in terms of the AoE damage output, which I think if you're someone who is excited for Mythic Plus dungeons and wants to cleave everything down, Demon Hunters are looking really solid in that department as well. Rogue is another class that's also fantastic, but I can't really say much about Rogue because everything that I could say about Rogue, I already said it about other classes. Assassination and Subtlety are getting uncapped in AoE, so you're looking at massive damage improvements, just like a Windwalker Monk. Like a Demon Hunter, it has a variety of different covenants that synergize with builds, so whatever playstyle you like, you can garnish it with any covenant combo. So things like a Necrolord Out Rogue or a Venti or Subtlety Rogue that just synergize super well together, you'll be able to experience all these bits of gameplay. Like a Druid, Rogues are great in all kinds of content, be it PvE or PvP, so basically Rogues on this list because one of these different accents that I talked about from other classes, the Rogues receive a little bit of praise from what we mentioned before and also just compacted into this class. Finally, I'm going to name Warlocks because I'm really excited about some of the changes they're getting. Warlock has been one of those classes that have been stuck with one covenant, and there's been significant improvements with the other covenants. Before I dive into the covenant discussion, have you seen the Mage Tower Transmog? It's probably the best one looking in the game. But for real, in terms of the covenants, I feel like this is the class that has a lot more to discover about itself over time. Warlocks, for the most part, have been stuck towards Night Fae, and unless you're playing certain obscure builds with Necrolord, you don't really have too many options. Now that you'll be able to switch covenants easily, I feel like there's going to be a lot of room for experimentation. Now that you can craft your legendaries and scrap the ones you don't like without any repercussion, it might be a lot easier for players to try different builds, certain playstyles that potentially have big value in right situation. However, not every build is born just from simming. Sometimes you have to actually experiment with the game, the actual in-game theory crafting behind builds, trying out different builds, trying them in different situations and seeing if there's any value or potential. And now that players will have more freedom to play what they like or even give it a go without really having to be committed to that covenant, even though it might be suboptimal for the gameplay, players are at least able to go experiment, try it. If they don't like it, they can always go back. And I'm hoping that Warlock will be one of those classes that will have a lot of experimentation, especially post some of the different buffs and changes that are getting added in patch 9.1.5, particularly for the covenants and even certain legendaries. But don't let this video stop you from trying any class covenant combination you want, anything that interests you. I just wanted to pick some of the classes that stand out to me the most personally for 9.1.5, some of the things that I want to experiment with, some of the potential that I see in some of these classes, especially when you're coming back to the game, you're looking to pick something up, especially long term. But honestly, give them all a try. Alt leveling should be a lot easier with 9.1.5, so hopefully you'll be able to level a couple of characters to your heart's content. Thank you all so much for checking out this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you guys got your own recommendations for some of the classes any viewers should try themselves, let them know as well. As always, thank you all. You guys are wonderful, beautiful. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. And I'll see all of you in the next one.